So to join these motifs together, I'm using the same yarn that I've used for the motifs, which is Rickarumi DK cotton, and I'm using the same size hook, which is a 3.5mm. Of course, if you're making this in a different thickness of yarn, you would just do the join in the same yarn that you've made the motifs with, and also the same hook size. So the way I'm going to join this is with a single crochet join, which gives that nice sort of textured finish, which works really well with these sort of three-dimensional flowers. I'm going to start off by doing the vertical seams, these 2 vertical seams first, and then I'm going to do the 2 horizontal seams. So in that way we only end up with 2 ends to sew in from each seam, which obviously gives us 2, 4, 6, 8, as opposed to in my previous video, the other way of doing this is where you create all the, let's say we create the, do the horizontal seams first, or vertical, whichever way you want to do, and you make these kind of strips that you then join. Obviously there's a lot more ends with that, gives you more maneuverability and options, but I also wanted to show you this second way of joining. So with this second way of joining, obviously if you've got different coloured motifs, like here I've got different combination of colours, you need to make sure that you know what the layout is and where you're putting your flowers. If you've got the same motifs with the same colours, coloured flowers, then you don't have to worry too much about what's going where. So actually I can't remember if I said I was doing horizontal or vertical first. I think I'm just gonna, doesn't really matter because it's more or less the same depending on which way up you look at it. So let's just start. I'm going to join this seam along here, so these 3 along here, I'm going to join them with single crochet. So I'm going to start by getting these 2 pieces at the corner, and then remember this particular pattern has got a chain 2 in the corner, and what we need to think about is that if we have an invisible dotted line running up through the middle of this chain 2 space, we've got 1 chain belonging to this right hand side and 1 chain that belongs to this left hand side. So we're joining this side here, so we always need to take one of these chains on this side as our first stitch to go into, and then obviously make sure you're matching up with your back piece. So I'm now going to join the yarn, and I'm using this slightly different colour. I think it looks good with a different colour. That allows you to add an extra dimension of contrast and texture. So I'm joining the yarn just by holding the tail end at the back and then pulling the yarn through. Then I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to single crochet in that same chain. So note that I'm working into the chain rather than the chain space, so I'm treating the chain just like a normal stitch. So now I'm just going to carry on joining with a single crochet, matching the stitch of the piece at the front with the next stitch, corresponding stitch of the piece at the back. So we're going through front loop, back loop of both front and back. So each time you will end up with these 4 loops, 4 parts of the stitches on your hook. So it's quite important to keep tilting the work so that you can see exactly what's going on here. Just lost control of that. So keep going, matching up front and back, and what you're aiming for is a relatively neat and tight gauge. You don't want it too tight because then it will distort the work, and also it won't lay flat properly. Imagine it as like the ring bindings of a book or something. If this is too tight, it won't allow these to open up neatly. So let's just keep going. I've just got a few left. I'm not happy with that. That was too baggy. Front and back, front and back. And hopefully if you've counted your stitches, not doing a very good job here. Hopefully if you've made the correct number of stitches, it'll all match up perfectly. There and there, and remember the last stitch is always one of the chains from your chain 2 corner. So that chain, and then remember we're treating the chain like a normal stitch, so we're going tail end's getting in the way. We're going front loop, back loop, which can be a little bit tricky if it's tight, but it's worth doing it because it really anchors in that stitch into exactly the right spot. Right, so we've done this first bit of the seam. So if you remember from version 1 of this seam join, if you're doing the other version, you would now fasten off and then do the next bit. But with this version, we are going to chain 1, and then we're going to carefully get these 2 bits. So the key is not to lose control of everything that's going on here, and get this side ready for the next join. And remember, again, we're always starting off with one of the chains from the chain 1 space. So don't forget your chain 1, because that's kind of what's going to be used to jump over or even go under, depending on which way you're doing it. This will actually be going under when we subsequently do the horizontal seams. So front loop, back loop of the next motif that you're joining, and front loop, back loop of the first chain of that other motif there. And then, oops, I've got my yarn on the wrong side. Chain 1. So you can see this is a little bit more fiddly, and you've got to sort of have everything planned out. And again, this is a kind of needs to be best done on a flat surface rather. I think if you're trying to do this on your lap on the sofa or something, you can very quickly get into a bit of a mess. So again, we're just joining in exactly the same way, matching front and back. I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back when I'm ready to join the next 2 pieces, so I can show you again how we do the next stage. So I'm coming up to making the last single crochet stitch in each of the corresponding chains of, this is a very tight one here, loosen up that back loop a bit. This is when nails are useful. I do tend to chain quite tightly. Okay, there we go. That's the last single crochet from the side of this motif, and again we're going to chain 1, get our next 2 pieces. Remember to keep the yarn behind. First chain from this side of stitches, and then the first chain in the back. Gently tighten everything up, and away we go again. So I'm just going to do exactly the same, matching up each stitch front and back. I'm just going to get to the end of this one. I'll meet you back in a minute. Coming to the last stitch of this last piece, the side of these two motifs, which is chain 1 space. And now we're ready to fasten off. So obviously I've just got 3 motifs here, but if you're making a blanket and you had a, you know, maybe quite a few more motifs, so maybe like 20 or something, you would just do the same procedure would apply. You'd just keep going, you'd have all your motifs ready to join, and you would just keep doing the same thing. So here you can see these are all joined now, and they're separated with a chain 1. So now it's time to join these next three pieces onto here. So as you can see, this is why you have to be quite organized, because you know everything's got to be nice and flat, because you could easily sort of twist things around, and things can get quite unwieldy if you're making a large blanket or something. If you're just making a cushion cover or something small, probably not too bad. Something much larger like a blanket or a throw, and you're going to have to think about your where you're doing this work to make sure you don't get into a mess. So anyway, same principle applies, but matching things up. So this one to here, and I'm going the first chain, this side of this motif, going into the first chain of this motif here, holding a tail end at the back, pulling through a loop, chaining 1, single crocheting in exactly that same spot, and then just as before I'm going ahead and just matching up front and back and joining with a single crochet. So this next bit is basically just exactly the same as what we've just done here, so I'm not going to bother filming and showing you that. Instead I'm going to go ahead and finish this seam, and I'll come back to you when I'm ready to do the horizontal seam. So here we are, I have done all my vertical joins. I'm now ready to do my horizontal joins. So pick a part where you want to join. So I'm going to just going to go here, and then we start off in exactly the same way. So the first chain that belongs to this side that we're joining, match it up with the first chain of your chain 2 corner that belongs to the back piece. Hold a tail end at the back, pull up a loop, chain 1, single crochet into exactly the same spot, and then matching stitches front and back, just like we've done for all the others. So I'm coming up to this vertical seam that I've already done. So I'm still joining this motif in every stitch, including the first chain that belongs to this motif, which at this point some of those chains can be quite tight because you've already used the other side for seaming the vertical bit. Okay, I've done it. Might as well catch that in while I'm there. Right, so now we come to this vertical seam, and it's pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is chain 1, and that kind of, when we make the next stitch, we're just jumping over that vertical seam, and then we're going straight into the first chain that belongs to this side of this motif. So open that back one up first, that tends to loosen things. First chain of that, first chain of this, and we carry on. So I'll just do a couple more joins here, and then we'll have a quick look at what that looks like. So what that will look like is this, and I'm going to just pull this. I mean, it'd be better if I sewed it in, to be honest. So as you can see, that method of doing all the verticals or all the horizontal, doesn't really matter, joining them first and then having a chain one between them, then when you come to do the other join, in this case horizontal one, all you do is a chain one, which allows you to then jump over this seam you've made here, and what it does is give a really lovely neat finish. And this single crochet is really nice raised effect. I think this works particularly well with three-dimensional motifs such as this. I'm not sure what it would look like with a very flat motif, probably look nice as well. I've never actually used this stitch with a completely flat motif. I really like using this join for you know, textured motifs with a bit of height to them. Anyway, so I'll carry on joining this one, and then I'll just show you one more time when I get to here. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and I'm sure you've got it, but catch up with me in a minute when I'll show you again. So I've just put the single crochet in the last chain of these two motifs here. Now I am ready to jump over this seam, so I'm going to chain one and then working straight back into this chain of this motif that belongs to this side and the chain of the back motif, and then single crochet. So that's basically it. I'm just going to finish off the other horizontal seam, show what it looks like, and then I'll show you how to put on a final round and how to hide your ends to make everything look super neat. So here we are. I've finished the horizontal and vertical seams. It's looking pretty nice, but what we want to do now is just put a final border around the edge that matches these. So it's pretty straightforward really. It's just going to start in a corner. You don't actually have to start in a corner, you can start anywhere you like really. You could even start let's start here and join in the same way, tail end at the back, pull up a loop, chain one and single crochet in the same spot. So then all we're going to do is we're just going to single crochet into each of these stitches along the edge in exactly the same way, one into each stitch, one into the chain. So when we come to this seam stitch, what we're actually going to do is crochet into a part of it. So this is the start of the row, because you can tell the tail end is coming out at the bottom, and then we've got this little bit of yarn sort of going horizontally across the top. So that's the bit we're actually going to work into. We're going to single crochet into that, so don't worry if it comes a bit loose, we can sew the end in and fix that later. So, and then we're going to revert back to our usual thing, which is going into that first chain and then every single stitch. And by the way, if you are having problems getting into those chains, you can just go into the chain space. Sometimes that looks fine, so it's up to you to decide what you prefer the look of. So here you can see that's what it looks like from at the end where you start the seam, and then we just carry on doing exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to, obviously this next one is going to be exactly the same because that's also the start of a seam. I'm going to carry along here. I won't film it. I will meet you when I'm ready to come to this corner, and then I'll show you what we do in the corner, which is not very difficult, and then I'll show you what we do when we get to how we work into the end of one of these seams. So I'm coming up to the corner, and this is super easy. I am just going to put 3 single crochets into the chain 2 space, and then carry on round along the next side by putting 1 single crochet into each stitch. So here you can see where I added the border where this other seam was. So let's keep going. I'll catch up with you again when I'm ready to crochet into this seam here. Just putting the last stitch in that motif, and now I am ready to crochet into this seam. So what I actually like to do is just undo where we fastened off. We pull the loop through as if to chain, pull the cut yarn through as if to chain, then we pull it all the way through, but I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to literally pull the live loop, oops, I don't know if you see that, pull the live loop completely open like that, and then that allows us to crochet into, so you can see here it's like a little upside down teardrop shape. We're going to crochet into that, single crochet into that, and then don't worry if it goes a bit baggy, because you can just sew that end in afterwards anyway. And then same procedure again, we're just going to go and single crochet into the first chain of that motif, and single crochet into all the remaining stitches. So again, if it's gone a bit loose, don't worry, because you can, if it's gone out of shape, you can see as I'm pulling that, it really sorts it out, so you'll be able to sew that in afterwards. So that's how you do the ends of the seam where you fastened off, and the rest of it I've already shown you. I've shown you how to do the corners, I've shown you how to do the starts of the seam. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe I'll show you this at this end of a seam again quickly, because we're almost there anyway. So have a quick look, chain, single crochet into there. Right, undo the end of that seam, pull the live loop out completely, tuck that tail end round to the back, go into that stitch. So you can see I'm just sort of catching one loop of it really, and because I'm perpendicular to it, it just automatically aligns itself into the correct position, and back into that tricky little chain and single crochet. So have a look at that, tighten it up a bit. So there you can see, looks pretty good. I mean, this hasn't been washed or blocked or anything, and obviously because what I'm using is cotton, this will have a certain amount of stitch memory, so there is an element of being able to kind of block it into the shape you want it to stay in. So that looks pretty nice. We've got this side here. Let's get rid of this slip stitch knot, it's really annoying. On this side, that will be sewn in out of the way. So here you can see in one shot, start of a seam, end of a seam, how we deal with it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off, and then I'm going to sew in all my ends and show you what it looks like at the end. So here we are, all the ends are nicely sewn in. I think this makes a really smart and effective finish to your blanket. So if you like this, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. You can find details of where to find this flower pattern by visiting the link in the video.